The film begins in sunny Spain, where we meet Rafa, a MotoGP racer gearing up to join the big leagues in the World Superbike Championship selection. Besides being a speed demon on the tracks, Rafa is a loving dad to one kiddo and carries the big dream of stepping into Lorenzo's shoes as the champion this season. As the race gets underway, there's a cocktail of nerves and excitement in the air. Everyone is revved up, wearing big smiles, yet you can see a hint of nervousness in their eyes. They all share one dream. It was zooming ahead of the pack on their snazzy Kawasaki Z600RR bikes and crossing the finish line first. But then our man Rafa pulls a rabbit out of the hat, tapping into a special skill only he knows. It seems to do the trick because, in no time, he's breezing past everyone, grabbing the top spot. He can almost taste the victory. But just when we think it's a clear road ahead for Rafa, fate throws in a curveball. With just a couple of laps to go, his bike gives up on him. Just like that, his dreams hit a roadblock. It's a bitter pill to swallow as his journey to becoming a superbike star comes to a screeching halt, at least for this year. He can't believe that he'll have to hold onto his dream for another whole year before he gets another shot at the selection. It's a tough break, but Rafa isn't the type to give up that easily. He knows he'll be back, ready to race another day. At that time, Rafa is kinda lost in his thoughts. Then, out of the blue, this lady named Regina comes over. She sees potential in him and offers him a golden opportunity to join Honda's top team. Rafa didn't need to think twice. He was all in, promising to show up ready and eager for the triumphs to possibly become a racer, just like his idol, Lorenzo. Now Rafa isn't just about bikes. He's also juggling a job at the port, handling forklifts to make some cash. Once he clocks out from there, he heads straight to fetch his young lad, Matteo, from his ex-wife Natalia's place. The deal between him and Natalia was to let Matteo hang out and have some fun times with his dad over the weekends. It's a nice setup, really, making sure Matteo grows up happy and healthy, just like any other kid. Rafa's place is actually this cool workshop that doubles as his home. It's also a mini museum showcasing all the trophies he snagged from various motocross and super sport events. The shelves filled with trophies are like a testament to his knack for tearing it up on the tracks. On Sunday, it was time for Matteo to head back. Rafa took him back to Natalia's, where she was busy with her workout, leaving them with the promise of more father-son adventures next weekend. In a spur-of-the-moment kind of mood, Rafa plucks up the courage to ask Natalia if they can give their old romance another shot. He's dreaming of making things right between them, but Natalia shuts that down real quick. She points out that Rafa always seemed more in love with his motorbike than with caring for his family's well-being. That was the deal breaker for her, the reason she chose to walk away in the first place. Not long after, Rafa finds himself at the racetrack, all set to try his luck in the Honda team's main racer selection. The place is buzzing with young guns, all geared up and pumped to show what they've got. Soon after, Regina lays out the game plan. It was a 4-round competition spread out over a couple of weeks. Once everyone's got the drift, the starting flag waves and round 1 kicks off. Now, here's where it gets cool. Despite being a bit older than the other guys, Rafa totally rocks it on his Honda CBR 600R, cruising his way to the top spot with ease. Regina can't help but flash a proud smile from the sidelines. In her eyes, roping in Rafa for the team was shaping up to be a genius move. So, after acing the selection, Rafa is all fired up and can't wait to share his awesome news with Natalia. But when he gets to her place, the scene is totally not what he expected. The place is all trashed, and he notices that Natalia has this nasty bruise on her lip, kinda like she got hit by someone. Just as he's about to dial up the cops, Natalia stops him. That's when the whole shocking truth spills out. Turns out she's been mixed up in some sketchy drug delivery gig working for this dude named Carlos, who's a big shot in the cartel world. Things have gone south because a huge shipment worth a cool 200,000 euros has gone missing, and now she's in hot water with Carlos. But instead of blowing his top, Rafa is the picture of calm. He takes Natalia and Matteo under his wing, bringing them to his workshop where they'd be out of harm's way. It just goes to show that, deep down, Rafa is a stand-up guy who's willing to step up and protect his family, even when the going gets rough. So, after seeing the mess Natalia was in, Rafa's heart just sank. After all, she's the mother of his kid. Knowing he couldn't just sit back, Rafa makes up his mind to have a word with this Carlos guy. But first, he hits up his buddy Cortez, who deals in stuff to scoop up some intel on Carlos. With the lowdown from his mate, Rafa heads over to Carlos' base to try and sort out the mess Natalia was tangled in. He even spills the beans about being a superbike racer and promises to clear the debt in a couple of months. But Carlos isn't having any of it, shutting down Rafa flat. So, a bit downhearted, Rafa heads home to brainstorm some other way to get Natalia off the hook. But before he can even catch a breath at home, his phone rings with a call from one of Carlos's guys, nudging him to make a move to a tattoo shop on the city fringes. And here's where things take a wild turn. Once Rafa gets there, this guy named Boro from Carlos' crew nudges him into a car to go on a little errand. In a blink, they're at the port in Mercy City to snag a package filled with drugs. The plan was Rafa need to zoom that package back to the tattoo place, riding a slick Kawasaki Ninja ZX600R. But it's not as simple as it sounds. En route, he needs to make a pit stop to refuel at a specific place and weave through the streets super carefully to dodge the cops. It seems like Rafa's got no choice but to play delivery guy, steering clear of trouble the best he can. With no time to waste, Rafa jumps on his bike and gets cracking on the task handed to him. But he hits a snag and the cops are on his tail, zooming behind him in a fast-as-lightning Nissan GT-R 35. Yet, thanks to Rafa's wicked skills with the bike, he manages to shake them off, making it to the tattoo place just in the nick of time. But here's the twist. When Carlos rips open the package, it's filled with nothing but starch. Turns out, this was his sneaky way of testing Rafa's mettle. Impressed, Carlos pitches a deal to Rafa. He wants Rafa to work as his delivery guy for a couple of months to clear Natalia's debt. Without batting an eyelid, Rafa takes the gig, gets handed a new phone, and now he's on call for Carlos anytime. Now juggling this new shady job with his regular day work is throwing Rafa for a loop. It's messing with his racing dreams big time. Like on the day of the second round of the Honda team trials, he's so caught up he doesn't even hear his phone buzzing. At that time, Boro finds him at the racetrack, all impatient and stuff, and hustles him to the port for another delivery run to the tattoo shop. To keep him going, Boro hands over some pills to keep Rafa's energy pumped up, no matter how exhausting things get. As Rafa was zooming along, he found himself in hot water again, with the cops right on his tail. They were on high alert because someone reported a suspicious Kawasaki Ninja ZX600R burning rubber on the streets. Rafa was pretty freaked out because it felt like the cops were inching closer and closer. But luck was on his side cause he spotted a parked truck at a crossroad and hid behind it, managing to give the cops the slip. When he finally got to Carlos' place, Rafa couldn't hold back his frustration about the bike not being quick enough. He urged Carlos to hook him up with a Beefleer 1000 Kawasaki, fitted with racing tires to boot, to ensure the cops wouldn't stand a chance in catching him during his delivery runs. Later back home, Rafa assured Natalia that the Carlos issue was sorted, giving a shout out to Cortez for the assist. But Rafa kept mum about the deal he struck with Carlos cause he didn't want to pile more stress on Natalia's plate. The next day, Rafa got his hands on the legendary Kawasaki ZH2 motorbike, equipped with a snazzy selfie stick and a powerhouse 1000 engine. This thing was a beast, and the cops had a tough time trying to catch up with Rafa as he zipped through the streets. But juggling all his jobs from working at the factory, racing, and now moonlighting as a drug courier was taking a toll on him. To keep going, he relied on the energy-boosting pills that Boro had given him. Time flew by, and before Rafa knew it, the third round of driver tryouts was just around the corner. Even though he was beat, Rafa showed up with all guns blazing. But during a race, he accidentally collided with another racer, sparking a heated exchange. The other guy accused Rafa of causing the crash on purpose, but he stood his ground, insisting it was just an accident. Later that evening, Rafa came home to find Natalia all packed up and ready to head out the door. Panic surged through him as he pleaded with her and Matteo not to abandon him. He held on to a glimmer of hope that they could patch things up. Despite the chaos at home, duty called yet again, and Rafa had to dash into the city center to deliver another package. This time around, Rafa was aware that the city was buzzing with a massive protest, and cops were everywhere keeping an eye on things. On the other hand, Carlos, always thinking on his feet, suggested Rafa to weave through the crowd on a dirt bike. Later that evening, while Rafa was hanging tight, Cortez showed up urgently advising him to cut ties with Carlos ASAP. According to Cortez, Carlos had no plans of letting Rafa off the hook even after their deal was done. Despite the grim warning, Rafa felt he had no choice but to see the job through to the end. Long story short, Rafa revved up his bike and began dodging between protesters and the police. Out of nowhere, a gang of armed dudes started shooting at him, hitting his bike and causing him to crash. Things were heating up quickly, with the group hot on his heels as he sprinted to a nearby abandoned factory for cover. Fearing for his life, he rang up Boro, pleading for a quick pickup because the guys chasing him seemed really bad news. At that moment, Rafa bolted at full speed, desperately searching for Boro's car. Thankfully, with Boro's assistance, he managed to get away safely. Carlos, however, was not pleased with the turn of events and pointed fingers at Boro's cousin named Fatal, suspecting him of setting up the attack because he was part of a rival gang. But Boro stood firm, convinced that his cousin wasn't involved in any such wrongdoing. Then, once he got back to Natalia's place, Rafa's secret life as a drug courier was finally out in the open. Realizing of his sacrifices, Natalia couldn't help but be touched. This newfound understanding led them to reunite, ready to face the world together. The following day was a big one for Rafa, cause he was participating in the decisive race to secure a spot as the main racer on the Honda team. Fired up, he started off strong, taking an early lead. But as the race progressed, his focus wavered, leading him to choose a wrong path on the track. Regina, who had been rooting for him, couldn't hide her disappointment at this unexpected downturn. Rafa had squandered a golden opportunity, letting her hopes for him crash and burn. Determined to at least clear his slate with Carlos, Rafa resolved to successfully complete his final task for the gang leader. Coincidentally, this day also marked the end of his tenure in Carlos' shady world. The next day, Rafa headed over to a rundown building where Boro was waiting to collect some money from a client. Just as Rafa was about to leave, thinking his job was done, Boro dropped a bombshell that he had another package for Rafa to deliver the next morning. However, this didn't sit well with Rafa at all, cause he felt like he was just being exploited at this point. When he showed his frustration, things escalated quickly, with Boro assaulting him and even threatening to hurt his wife if he didn't comply. But Rafa wasn't about to let this slide, not when his wife and career were at stake. In a fit of rage, he fought back, hitting Boro repeatedly with a helmet until Boro lay lifeless. Panicking, he dialed Cortez, seeking help to get rid of Boro's body. Seizing the moment, Rafa struck a bargain with Cortez that he would spill the beans on the location of Carlos' warehouse, allowing Cortez to swoop in and take over Carlos' operations. Hearing that, Cortez was all in, having harbored his own grudge against Carlos for encroaching on his territory. The next morning, a furious Carlos showed up at Rafa's place, demanding to know Boro's whereabouts and what happened to his money. Thinking on his feet, Rafa spun a tale about Boro and Fatal running off with the cash, hoping to divert Carlos' wrath. At that moment, Carlos bought Rafa's storied hook, line, and sinker, instructing him to hunt down Boro and Fatal. However, as they were on their way, Carlos couldn't shake off the feeling that they were being followed. Changing course, he headed to his warehouse to ensure his stash of drugs was safe. Meanwhile, Rafa didn't waste any time and quickly messaged Cortez the location, requesting a quick pickup. But then, trouble brewed. One of Carlos' guys called him out on the lie, pointing out that Fatal couldn't possibly be involved since he'd been in jail for the past week. Realizing he'd been deceived, Carlos' temper flared and his mind raced to murderous thoughts. He was ready to end Rafa right there, but quick thinking, Rafa seized the opportunity to snatch Carlos' motorbike keys and make a run for it. But Carlos wasn't about to let him get away that easily. He pursued Rafa relentlessly, finally cornering him at a storage facility. Without a second thought, he shoved Rafa into the trunk of a car, dead set on making him lead the way to Boro and the vanished cash. But Rafa had one more card to play. He still had his phone on him. Wasting no time, he pinged his location to Cortez, holding onto a sliver of hope that help would arrive in time. As Carlos made his way out of the warehouse zone, his journey came to a sudden halt. Suddenly, a massive truck smashed into him, pinning him inside his car. Seizing the opportunity, Cortez and a buddy swooped in, finishing off Carlos swiftly. They then freed Rafa and whisked him away to safety. With the past behind him, Rafa embraced a fresh start, reuniting with his family, eager to rebuild their lives together. Things were looking up even more when Regina approached him, extending an invitation to rejoin her racing team. She was convinced that Rafa had what it took to be a star racer for the Honda team. But life threw another curveball at Rafa. As he was about to catch up with Regina at the racetrack, he was confronted by two cops who promptly arrested him. In the station, it became clear that his ties to the drug cartel hadn't gone unnoticed. Yet, instead of facing jail time, an unexpected offer was placed on the table. He was asked to join the police force in their fight against the rampant drug problem on the streets. Breathing a sigh of relief, Rafa agreed to this new role, but he had one request: that he wanted to do it riding a Kawasaki ZH2 bike fitted with racing tires. With an agreement in place, the closing scenes show Rafa in action, teaming up with the cops and successfully nabbing a drug dealer on a busy highway, marking a thrilling end to his roller coaster story. The film ends. The moral lesson from this film is always remember: if life gives you a motorcycle, make sure it's a fast one. And if you find yourself in a sticky situation, just race your way out of it.